We sat down with Sinn Féin and for a period, probably 6 to 9 months, we looked at the issues which were concerning both them and us in terms of the sharper edges, if you like, of welfare reform. We negotiated a package which had the removal of what is known as the bedroom tax for anybody in a property in Northern Ireland. And we agreed that we should have a contingency fund, and we looked at putting aside some 30 or 40 million pounds to deal with the special hardship cases that would flow from it. As with any other set of negotiations, the Sinn Féin representatives have to go back to their party and I have to go back to mine. We got approval from the Democratic Unionist Party for the package. Sinn Féin was unable to get agreement from their party for the package. And in the 11 months since then, they have never come back to us to ask for any further changes, nor have they succeeded in all of their negotiations with the NIO and with the British government in getting any changes to the process at all.
Did you believe that Martin McGuinness and his team locally here at Stormont had agreed to a deal?
Well, I wouldn't take any package to my party colleagues that I wasn't satisfied with myself.
So you felt that he was satisfied with the compromises that were contained in that agreement?
Yeah, I don't think either of us were saying, isn't this brilliant? But both of us recognised, given the circumstances that we were in, this was the best fist that could be made of it, and it would provide the very best welfare package in the whole of the United Kingdom.
And it is your belief, is it, that he then took that agreement to the wider party and they said no?
It's not my belief, it's my knowledge, because he asked me to come in and meet him on a Saturday, where he informed me that was the case. And that was 11 months ago, that was in May of 2013. In the intervening months, there had been no changes negotiated by Sinn Féin or the SDLP for that matter, and now we have a final position. So let's remove this nonsense that people are still going on about, that somehow we can go back and we can negotiate further. We have a final position from the Treasury. It's past the point of any return. The position has been set out in letter. The cuts have already begun.
So does that mean then, has that led you to the conclusion, Mr Robinson, that Martin McGuinness has had his wings clipped within Sinn Féin?
Well, I have noticed, and I don't want to get into the internal difficulties of any party, but things have changed, and they've changed massively over the last year or so, with the rise of Sinn Féin in Dáil Éireann. And it is very clear that they are having a difficulty in having a party in government in Northern Ireland and a party in opposition in the south. And the reality is that the sensible things that you need to do and have to do, and some of them do require us taking difficult decisions here in Northern Ireland because we're in government. The sort of crankery that there is in the south, the economic illiteracy that there is in the south in terms of their opposition position, they won't allow the sensible decision to be taken in Northern Ireland because it might show up the kind of position that they're adopting in the south.
Of course, Alex Maskey says you seem determined to replace the Ulster Unionist Party as the Tory party's new partner in the north. He says you've opted to fight the coming elections on an anti-welfare state manifesto.
We're going to go forward on the basis of taking pragmatic decisions that are necessary, facing up to reality, not burying our head in the sand. The facts are these, that if Sinn Féin do not accept the reality of what the position is in terms of the budget cuts that are taking place, frontline services in Northern Ireland are going to be hit. That is unavoidable. The money has been taken out of our budget. It's not there. We have to reduce our spend because we're being penalised by not putting forward the enhanced welfare package that we now have.
Well, that's if you accept Danny Alexander's latest position, which is that this is the deal. Well, Sinn Féin simply doesn't accept it. I mean, and you'll have heard Sinn Féin representatives saying, stand up to them, don't accept the cuts. That's their position. That's their position.
Don't try and be silly about this matter.
Well, no, that's what Sinn Féin's position is. It's not what I'm saying. You know, that's what Sinn Féin says time and again. As a sensible
commentator, you should know better than to put ludicrous positions like that. Nobody believes them. Nobody could believe them. The Treasury has already taken the money out. How many times do I have to say it? The money is not there. We have run out of road. There is already a reduction in the budget. This isn't something to be negotiated. It has already happened.
So where are we at the moment? Because this is not a DUP administration. This is a grand coalition of 5 parties. And clearly, you as First Minister and Martin McGuinness as Deputy First Minister hold considerable sway. There seems to be no agreement between the two of you on this position of welfare reform. How do we move forward from here? Because you're saying it has to happen, he's saying it's not happening. What happens next?
Well, let's also remember that we did have the basis upon which we could go forward, and unfortunately he couldn't sell it to colleagues. The reality is that the cuts have taken place. Therefore, we have to look at where the money has to come out of. Now, I am of the view that we cannot have any cuts in the health service. I believe that the health service has to be protected. But we need to be having those serious discussions within the executive right now. We can't wait until the elections are over, until the summer is over. Those decisions have to be taken now as to where the £100 million of cuts are going to be imposed.
Yeah, of course, Sinn Féin's position is that by implementing these welfare cuts or this welfare reform, you're also taking out potentially hundreds of millions of pounds from the local economy.
Yeah, well, again, this is economic illiteracy. They don't understand the position. There was a trajectory. I'll try and explain this in the simplest of terms in case anybody from Sinn Féin is watching. The trajectory for increases in benefits was something of that order. But under the new system, it is going to be increasing at a lower level. The money that they're talking is the differential between what might have been in the perfect world and what is now the case. It is not money that is coming out of the economy of Northern Ireland. It won't be there. So there is no loss of £450 million, which has been talked about by some representatives of Sinn Féin. This is mythical money. It doesn't exist.
You talked last night about the nuclear option, if necessary. Options. Okay. What are the nuclear options? What does that mean?
Well, again, if I start reeling them out, and there are a whole series of options that we can consider, and indeed, you know, I think probably most people that know how government operates knows what those options might be. But if I start reeling them out, then I'm threatening people and people start digging.
Yeah, but the phrase nuclear option sounds pretty threatening in the first instance. So you need to tell us what you mean.
Let's be clear. The facts are there. The budget is being cut. Our frontline services can't take that cut. And therefore we will have a penalty to pay. You can't ignore it. You can't spend as if the penalty was never imposed upon us. The money won't be there for us to use. And if we go through our spending limits, let's be clear what happens. The amount that we spend over what was allocated to us is taken off the following year, plus a further penalty is imposed upon us. So this isn't something that we can dodge. This is something that we have to deal with.
Yeah, but I suppose that's the economic nuclear option, I suppose, or one of the economic nuclear options. What about the political nuclear option? Because when I think when people hear a phrase like that in this part of the world, they think there may be some kind of political dimension to it as well. I mean, is that a threat from Peter Robinson again to pull down the institutions? Is that a possibility?
Let's be clear. Any option that we talk about is politics. This is all about politics. And it can be as simple as saying to the government, this government is not competent to take difficult decisions because two of the parties in the 5-party coalition aren't prepared to take difficult decisions. Therefore, you have to take this office. We no longer want to have devolved to us these issues. And there were some people, including myself, who argued that from the very beginning, that in areas where there should be parity, it shouldn't be devolved to the devolved institution. So that is one option, and some people might well consider that to be a nuclear option.
And is that a serious option? Are you coming round to that view that that is what is necessary in the current situation?
If people aren't capable of governing, taking those difficult decisions, then that power should not be devolved.
So how far developed is that notion at this stage?
Why should the person who needs a hip operation, the person who needs the best of cancer drugs, why should they be punished? Because the SDLP and Sinn Féin aren't prepared to take those difficult decisions. I don't believe they should.
So are you saying that the political maturity that we require to run Northern Ireland for ourselves does not exist at the moment? And one of the options has to be that we go back, you go back to the Secretary of State, you go to the Prime Minister David Cameron and you say, listen, do you know what, I've done my best, I can't do any more. It's all yours.
Well, you're right. It is clear at this moment in time it does not exist with all the parties that are necessarily a part of the government. That was one of the nuclear options. Another nuclear option, of course, is to recognise that we will not be prepared to sign up to any budget next year on the basis of ignoring the fact that there is a reduced budget available to us, and therefore we wouldn't agree that budget. In those circumstances, then the permanent secretary at the Department of Finance has to step in, and people will only have 95% of their previous year's budget available to them, and the remainder will have to pay for the penalties. So they won't be able to dodge it one way or the other.
It would get you off the hook, wouldn't it? It would get Sinn Féin off the hook, of course, as well, if we went back to direct rule for a period of time and a direct rule administration implemented welfare reform, got everything up and running again, and then said, OK, well, I think we're now on the straight and narrow. You can come back again and you can reconstitute yourselves as a devolved administration.
Well, I think we're talking about two different things, so let's be clear what we are talking about. There are a number of options. What you're suggesting is a further option, one that would be contemplated only in the most dire of circumstances. I'm talking about the government actually taking back particular devolved powers, the power that has not been exercised properly by Sinn Féin and the SDLP because they're refusing to deal with the realities. And that particular power could be taken back. It's not available in Scotland or Wales. Northern Ireland alone has that power as a devolved government. That's why Scotland and Wales are having to look at other issues and are presently under the new regime that is taking place in England.
Not directly related subject, but nonetheless a very important subject for your view of what you heard yesterday, presumably, about the NIO's alleged actions regarding OTRs. I mean, we hear that Gerry Adams called Number 10 saying that he wanted Jerry McGeoch released. We hear then that Number 10 contacted the PSNI to make that case. That's part of an ongoing select committee inquiry, obviously, but there's been quite a reaction already to some of what we heard yesterday. How did you regard it? Were you surprised?
Well, surprised would indicate that I didn't believe that Gerry Adams would be capable of attempting to get anybody to bypass the normal policing and judicial processes. So I'm not surprised at that kind of activity. I do recall that when we were dealing with policing and justice, how we were all being lectured that it was essential to have a process where there was operational independence on the part of the police. So if at the end of the inquiry concludes that there was that interference, then I think there are questions to be asked and answered by Downing Street, the Northern Ireland office, and indeed the then Chief Constable or whoever it was made contact with Norman Baxter on that occasion.
You talked there about Gerry Adams' role in that reported series of telephone conversations, and you said you weren't surprised at it. How would you sum up Gerry Adams' influence over Stormont at the moment? He is still the president of Sinn Féin. He is, of course, a member of a parliament in a different jurisdiction. But does he still have an influence over Sinn Féin in this building?
Unquestionably. And it's a very negative influence.
Why do you say that?
Well, because I know the slowdown that is taking place in terms of getting decisions taken, because the decisions that we might take might cause difficulties for Gerry Adams and his colleagues in the Dáil. I know some of the changes that are taking place within personnel in Sinn Féin, where more hardline people are being brought in, people more akin to Gerry Adams's position, to ensure that the Stormont politicians of Sinn Féin behave themselves. It is a very damaging influence.
Do you think that Martin McGuinness is less hardline than Gerry Adams? He's more of a pragmatic politician, is he?
I think there's a much more pragmatic approach from Martin McGuinness, who, because he is in government, recognises what he needs to do. I just think that there are deep divisions within Sinn Féin that are causing great difficulties to the process that we're involved in.
Finally, what would you say to people watching this interview today who would say, frankly, I've had a bellyful of the whole thing. As far as politicians are concerned, a plague on all their houses, and I'll tell you the one thing I'll not be doing on May the 22nd, and that is encouraging them by voting for them. I want nothing to do with it.
Well, you know, undoubtedly there are some people that take this self-righteous position.
Well, a lot of people in Northern Ireland don't vote.
You asked a question, let me answer it. They take that position. But who are the politicians? The politicians are the people they elect to take the positions that they do. This isn't a position adopted by Peter Robinson or by Martin McGuinness, for that matter. These are positions adopted by the people that we represent. These are their views being represented.
Yeah, but you also have to lead.
And I have offered that leadership. I'm telling you, difficult though it is, there are certain decisions that have to be taken. There are other people who are failing in leadership, but it's not me.